Hello all, Alison here. Welcome back to Words and Pictures for a Watercolour Wednesday. We haven't had one of these for a while, partly because we've been busy with Halloween concertina tag albums, which took up all the time in October. But I've got these paints, which I bought, I could go and look it up, but I think it's at least 2 years ago now, and maybe more. These are the Japanese watercolour paints, Gansai Tambi. They're a very particular kind of watercolour paint. They tend to be quite opaque and a little bit sticky. I did have a taster set of the original colours, but this is what I think they call their Art Nouveau set, and it's so pretty. And I just, I got tempted. So it comes in a lovely box. And I think there's probably a swatching piece of paper here. I've just taken the plastic off the outside, so I haven't really explored. Yes, so you can swatch your colours straight into here, and they actually, they do give them names. Saffron yellow, pale pink, alizarin crimson, cobalt turquoise, light, shadow green, beige grey, green gold, coral pink, mauve taupe, pale aqua, pea green, yellow brown, flax beige, oh I like that, potter's pink, old mauve, so hang on, mauve taupe and old mauve, cobalt green, ivy green, Mars yellow, ecru beige, vermilion, oh vermilion's such a good word, greyish blue, billiard green, green grey, Venetian red. Oh, I see they are numbered, so I can get that right. But I mean, I will do that, and we can even do that in another episode if you like. But I thought a slightly more fun way for me to just swatch them this morning and get a little taste for what they can get up to is to use my new tattered leafy kind of thing that's going on here. PaperArtsy Twisted Leaves that, came out it's a couple of weeks ago now. And given they're sort of in fours, I thought I might do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yes, I have counted correctly. I might do one leafy set per stripe of paint. So as with all watercolours, your best bet is to give them some water. Colours like water, watercolours particularly like water. And then, so these are just stamped in an Archival ink. Most of them are in coffee, I think. That one may have a couple of other colours on because I did it another day. And I'm just going to work through the stripes of colour. I think I was thinking one leaf per paint. And then I thought, well, that might be a bit dull. So I think what I'm going to do is on each do a little swatching. Yeah, so one of the things with these is they do need a bit of time for that water to sort of play with the pigment. So be generous with your time with these. A nice wet brush nib is also quite helpful. I mean, this is true of all watercolours. Give them that time to do something. I'm just wondering about having brilliant. Take your mind off the matter for a moment, and I've just put, I don't know what this is, green gold, looks to me like it might be, into whatever that pink is. I mean, you know me, I'm likely to start mixing my paints before I know it anyway, but just for this first go, it would be nice to have a bit of, ooh, that's a rich yellow gold, isn't it? Let's just spread it out, and you can see these colours are really vibrant. I'll come in a bit closer later on, but I'm going to do this first one sort of from here, I think, and then we'll zoom in. So I'm using my silver black velvet round. All of this, as usual, will be listed below. So I think it's going to be quite nice to just have the colours. Ooh, that's a lovely olive. As always, when I'm watercolouring, I've got 2 water pots on the go. The aim being that one of them sticks to cleaning the brush and the other one stays a bit cleaner so that I can use that water to activate paint without it being full of pigment. I'm not always terribly good at maintaining the difference. So a little rinse, a little bit of water to spread that out. I knew I was going to enjoy these greys. And then finally over here. So I could have a look that seems to be number 404. No, that's going to, so that they claim is sunrise yellow. Are these in order? Green gold 405, yes. Okay, so this labelling goes across the top. Flax beige. So I could, while I'm at it, put those in there as well. Might as well. Let's get a little bit more onto there. Spread it out with just a bit of water. See, that's going to make leaves almost exactly like the ones I've just been posting. Oh, saffron yellow, I beg your pardon, not sunshine yellow. That's me just glancing and not really paying attention. It's a teeny little, well, if they're, so I could do a paler wash over that side. Okay, let's make that the thing. Just made the decision. So I'm going to lift up some of that and go back in with a full-on colour version over this bit, but have it in its watery version over the naming. I think that's quite a good way to be able to see the colour in two forms. Grand. Let's maybe go alternating. So I'm now going in with flax beige. Let's do a full colour one in the square here. Nice. Rinse off a little and spread some into here very lightly. So I'm just getting a, usually when I swatch I would do a sort of ombre, but I'm going for a simple light dark on this, and I mean it is spreading. That's nice. So into this one, which is the green gold. It's more gold than green, I would say. It's got a great sort of mustardy tone to it. Just try not to get caught up in the flax beige next door. Good, and then I'll just use a little bit of water. It is going to end up being ombre because that's what I enjoy. Spreading that out into there. There we go. That does the job. And finally, see, I already just washed the brush in the wrong one there. Let's get some of this ecru beige. And that's a full-on beige tone. It's rather nice. And just spread it out into here. Grand. So I've now got tasters over here. I've got tasters over here. And now I'm going to have a bit of fun. Just starting with maybe some darks in at the base of these leaves. I'm going to keep these very loose and soft. I'm not necessarily going to worry about a perfect painting of them. Let's take a little bit of this, what did it call itself? Ecru beige. Take that round that side, maybe a slightly more watery version of that over here. That's nice. Let's get some of this green gold on the go because I think it's pretty intense. Oh, that is the one that I just put down there, but actually putting a little bit more in gives us a better depth of colour. That's nice. And then let's take this saffron yellow into the sunshine tips of the leaves. That's really pretty. This is the only time of year you'll find me using yellow. As you may have worked out, it's not a colour that appears here very often. But when it comes to autumn, sometimes yellow is the winner. And as I say, I've just been posting pictures today on my nature account with a definite final golden glow of November. I don't think the leaves are going to be around for very much longer. Do you think we can get away with maybe using this dark beige for our tree branch? Just a little touch of colour through there to give it a bit of presence. I think that does the job quite well. And maybe just a couple of dark dots in places. I'll let those carry on spreading out by themselves, which they will do very nicely. I'm on fairly cheap watercolour paper here. It's the usual Clairefontaine Goldline, cheapy cheap. I mean, not cheapy cheap, it's not dollar store watercolour paper, but it's a very basic, what I would call mixed media watercolour paper. That's pretty nice. Grand. I'll zoom in a little bit for the next one. I don't want to zoom in too much because I think this whole sort of workflow thing is of interest, but let's zoom in for the next quartet. Grand. So we're heading into Pink World. Interesting, not my usual port of call, except this autumn it seems to have been happening. So let's move those in a little bit so you can have a little look at that. Let's see if we start with putting that down here. This calls itself Pale Pink. There we are. It's quite an artificial looking pink, but I can imagine that in a soft version it's going to be rather a beautiful blossom affair. So that's one that I'm going to be very unlikely to use full on. Oh look, marvellous, perfect. If that happens, that drip of water that just started spreading things from side to side, I should have gone, instead of pink, I should have alternated again. Maybe we should do that. Maybe we should jump down to the bottom and start up from there. Yes, let's. So you're going to one side, not pink next. Let's do the greys next from the bottom of the pile. So beige grey. Let's start with beige grey. It's more leafy anyway. It's going to be a better sort of leafy journey, and we'll end up in fantasy pink. So beige grey going in here. Nice. That's very similar to, well, in distress terms it's pumice stone, and in Daniel Smith watercolour terms it's something like grey titanium, which is, as you may have noticed, a favourite of mine. Let's get that one down. This calls itself yellow brown. So interestingly, there are a couple of these that call themselves yellow tones of whatever colour it is, which, as you'll know, is not necessarily my favourite end of the colour spectrum to play. I like my colours in blue tones for the most part. Let's spread that one out. And then let's spread this one out. And you can see they are, when you've got plenty of water in them, they're perfectly translucent enough to work with. What have we got here? Down onto this bit, then into here, Mars yellow. Interesting. Personally, I'd call that Mars orange, but okay. It's a beautiful leafy colour. This is a grand combination for autumn, and yeah, mixed with those yellows at the top, really perfect autumnal colours in those top and bottom lines. Can't quite see where it calls it Mars yellow anymore, so I'm going to knock that back a little bit. There we go. You stay put. If you dry the paper, so that's what I got halfway through saying, if something happens here and colours start to mix, get in there and dry with paper towel or a cloth, because that's the thing that's going to stop the colour from spreading. That's what you want in order to prevent complete leakage. And again, this is a very orangey brown. I mean, this is good because when I have bought Daniel Smith colours, I have tended to err, Venetian red they call this. I guess that's kind of bricks and roof tiles, Venetian red. I have tended to err on the side of getting myself the bluier tones of colours. So it's quite interesting to have a set here, which is taking me towards the orange and red ends of each colour's spectrum. I'm looking forward to painting these leaves now. That's a beautiful set of colours there. And overall, as I say, those 8 colours together making me pretty happy. Let's start with, why don't we start with the Venetian red in quite a bold leaf here. You can see as soon as you do go watery with them, they do have a beautiful translucence. So I'm enjoying these. I suppose one reason I've slightly put off swatching these, oh sorry, there we go, on camera, that helps, is that I had slight reservations about the paints themselves. And I know that sounds crazy because I then went and bought these, but I was completely hooked by the colours. It was one of those things where I looked at the colour palette and my whole inside just, it was calling out to me. So oh look, that would be great for the branches, won't it? Look, that one, the yellow brown, perfect. And so despite my initial reservations about the paints as a brand, I think I found them quite sticky. I've just noticed that I didn't spread out the pale pink earlier, so I'm just heading over here to spread out the pale pink that went on that one. Yeah, that has turned into quite a pretty colour in spread out form. Yeah, so the paints themselves, I sort of had struggled with a little bit with the very few that I had. I tend to not very much like watercolours that are mixed with honey, because I find them quite sticky. For instance, I've tried some Sennelier paints in the past, and they're just not for me. Some people absolutely swear by a honey watercolour mix. It's one of the things that watercolour companies, makers use to give watercolours that beautiful, to glue the pigment together strictly. But the honey-based ones have never been my favourites, and that's a personal preference. That's really quite fun. I'm going to come in between some of these. So there we go. I'm going to put another dot of the, what was it, Mars yellow? Mars yellow, if you say so. It's a perfect leafy kind of glow. Going to bring some colour through there, some colour through there. Maybe pop a dot of the darker one. So we're sort of doing botanical painting at the same time as swatching our colours. You know, why not do the double? But it gives you a kind of feel for how the paints are going. And I'm enjoying these a lot more. And I don't think that's just about the colours. I think I'm probably much more comfortable these days with playing with watercolours. I think I probably had the others quite early in my journey. Right, how are we going to do this so that we stay dryish? That's had a drip of water, not to worry. What would be the best order? We could go back up here now. I think these are dry. So let's have a look at, except then we're going to end up with these two. Let's go through the middle here. Which one's that? Cobalt turquoise hue. So this must be the turquoises there going along this way. Let's have some fantasy turquoise leaves. I might rinse out my water before I do that. I'm back in a moment. I've zoomed a little way back out again. So hopefully at some point in this video, I'll be able to satisfy everybody. Washing the water out while you're using fairly similar colour tones, I'll quite often go quite a long way with the same pot of water. So I might do the whole of a painting with one pot of water. But when I'm doing a significant change like this from sort of yellows and reds to these turquoises, then some fresh water is really the way to go. So let's start with you. Where have I got room to put 4 colours down here? We've been in landscape for both of these, so I'm going to go portrait with this. I started a portrait with the pink as well, didn't I? I thought I'd started a portrait and then couldn't work out where it had gone. So I think we'll come down this side again, because that's where there seems to be space in terms of what I've stamped. And let's find out what you think you're called. Oh yes, cobalt turquoise light. That's what that was, and that's a lovely sort of mid. I would call that a mid turquoise. I quite like my turquoises on the duck egg end of things, so that's nice. Let's see what happens when we just spread it out. Yes, that's a lovely beachy turquoise. Let's spread a bit out here, just using the water to let that pigment move. And the next. This one looks right up my street. This is a very pale. Oh, interesting. So that's quite chalkily opaque. Pale aqua, that calls itself. That's got a much more chalky opacity to it than the first one. That's interesting. Let's spread that out over here. Yeah, I don't know if you can tell on camera, but that is kind of covering up the lettering more significantly, even though it's a much paler colour. Interesting. Good. And the next is a much deeper sort of teal colour. Constant constant discussions in our world about what colour teal is. My thing is, go and look at a teal duck, because that's where the word comes from. And a teal duck has these flashes of a sort of, yeah, pretty much this colour. A very greeny turquoise, dark greeny turquoise, a teal has under his wings. Cobalt green it is in these paint terms. And then this one looks very dark in the pan, but my guess is it won't be quite so full on as soon as you get some water involved in it. That really is a lovely sort of piney green. Billiard green they call it, as in a billiard table, I guess. Yep. For me, nature-minded as I am, it's much more of a sort of winter pine affair, I would say. Let's get some of that into there. Interesting. I've got too much water on my brush for both of those, and as a result they've sort of pooled. So using these a little bit drier is clearly the way to get good pigment on them. I'll come back and put a little bit more of the cobalt green in a minute. Let's rinse that off and take it on a little journey. Billiard green. Yeah, fair enough, I guess. It's not, yeah, it definitely feels piney to me. Kind of evergreen. It's a dark, but it's somewhere between, if in distressed terms, evergreen bough and pine needles, I guess. Right, now we're going to head up into the pinks. Oh no, we haven't painted the leaves. We're not going to head up into the pinks at all. Let's, oh no, that's not the colour we're using. Let's go fantasy leaves. Let's take a little bit of green pine branch into here. That really was quite messy. Really on the branch I should be switching to the finer paintbrush, but if you use the very tip, it should really be possible to do it better than I've just done it. If you like things staying inside the lines. Oh, see, that's quite nice knocked back as well though, isn't it? Quite like that as a less broad colour. There's already some water on the paper there, which is why that colour has just gone so very light. That's the darkest green. That's the billiard green, but in that watery form, as you can see, very subtle, nice colour. Let's get some water onto here and take a little bit of that very chalky one. So I'm maybe going to be a little bit more careful about going straight over the top of all my colours here. Let's get this mid turquoise into action, because I think that might be my favourite of these four. Not that it's fair to have favourites this early on. I haven't really discovered very much about what they'll do yet, but it's a really good sort of general turquoise, if that makes sense. Let's bring a little bit of you in. That's a real sort of, I don't know, there's something about this teal-y one that is quite toothy, quite sort of artificial, not madly in love with it. It's not quite the colour of, and maybe if I think of it as ocean as opposed to duck, maybe that'll help. So I'm going to get some colour down on these, and then I'm going to add in maybe a little bit of the dark as a proper dark. It's interesting because, I mean, turquoises are some of my favourite colours, but this is not my favourite batch at the moment. And I'm just wondering if it's because of the time of year it is. This is the time of year when, above all else, I like playing with autumn colours. Ooh, that's spreading out beautifully though. That's creating some depth. that is pleasing my eye. So it's just a sort of reaction thing to having colours that are not seasonal. That's how strongly my colour sense, my colour spidey colour sense wants to work with what's outside in nature and has a problem. I'm having a problem going to the beach. I need to imagine I'm in Australia, don't I? If I were in Australia, it would be perfectly okay to go to the beach at this point. Part of what's happening to me here is I desperately want a slightly yellower zing in some of that. Interesting. Having said I like things on the cool blue end of spectrums, that's what this is giving me. It's quite nice and icy, isn't it? Actually, yeah, think of them as winter colours, and then maybe we're on to something. Interesting. Good, good, good. I'm noticing my responses to the colours. That's all I'm doing. I'm not saying I hate them. I'm not saying not for me. I'm wondering whether I should rinse the water again before we do the pinks, but I think I might just use my clean water. So we've got the pale pink already in place. Let's go on to this, which looks like a sort of cherry blossom if I rotate these. And then I'm going to have to remember I'm now going from top to bottom as opposed to bottom to top. Try and stay on top of that. Yeah, I think these two together are going to do a nice rose thing. They're going to do a nice blossom thing. It'll be time to get the pink blossoms out again for summer, spring. These two are definitely Australian colour palettes for now. They're heading into spring and summer as we head into autumn, winter. It's pretty. There's a slight thing that's bugging me here, which is that some of that yellow really did interfere. I'm going to try and knock it back a bit, and then we might just put a little bit more pale pink, even though it's going to make it darker. Just going to try and make that pinker. Good. What have we got here? Potter's pink, this one says. Let's get it down onto here to start with. Interesting. Oh, no. See, this was exactly what I just said, going from top to bottom. I'm now going the other way, so the third paint is the third paint down, not the third paint up. Focus. Oh, so yes, that makes much more sense of Potter's pink. That's a real sort of clay colour. I'm having to think quite hard now. This is the trouble with zooming in, is I've had to rotate my paints. But I'm sure you appreciate the effort to keep things on camera. And let's spread that out. I'm expecting this to be fairly opaque because a Potter's pink tends to have... Potter's pink in Daniel Smith terms has quite a lot of granulation. And that can make it quite sort of opaque feeling because it's got a lot of texture. That's quite I quite like that progression of pinks. As you'll know, pink is a thing I'm a lot less scared of these days than I used to be. This one, however, looks pretty full on. Let's see what we get. Having said that, it is quite full on. Oh, that's poppies, isn't it? That's Californian poppies, Welsh poppies. Oh, I haven't done the thick version up here. Vermilion. Okay, fair enough. Yeah. And vermilion used to be a colour. I think I'm right in saying, oh, hang on, was that cochineal? Something used to be made with bugs. Maybe I'm thinking of cochineal. Ooh, look at it when he spread it out. So interestingly, this one was called Coral Pink. To me, this one is the one that's got a lot of coral kind of feeling to it. And I think the two together are going to be quite dramatic on these leaves. I think I might go with Potter's Pink for the branches. I think that might be the thing to do. Make sure I stay on camera. So again, just working with the very tip of the brush. There you go. See, it's perfectly possible to stay pretty neat. And let's put some of that down in here. As you can see, just spreading the colour out. Let's go in with a little bit of the coral, just for kind of drama's sake. Pop a little bit in there as well as a shadow. That's really fiery. Extraordinary. This is the coral pink. Let's just spread it out a little bit. That went on the brush very dry. So I'm just going to use a little bit of water to allow that to move. And as I thought, coral pink and the vermilion are going to play beautifully together to create a kind of blush tone. That's very pretty going up there. Let's get a little bit of this. What was it? Was it pale pink? Pale pink. A simple naming. It's spun sugar. In distress terms, spun sugar, I would say that is. It is definitely, that's definitely got an opacity to it. So interestingly, the pale colours, I suppose that makes sense because they've got a lot more, they'll have a lot more white pigment in them. So white can only ever be opaque in watercolour. You can't get yourself a fully transparent white. So those paler colours are carrying a lot of white pigment, and that means that they end up being chalkier, more opaque, more, whereas something like that vermilion can be very translucent. That's quite pretty. Interestingly, I'm enjoying that quite a bit more than the turquoises. Who would ever have thought it? Extraordinary. The colour journeys of life. I think I'll write a book one day. There we go. I mean, again, by themselves, obviously that's quite full on. But I can just imagine when I've got some green foliage around them. I know these are foliage, they're leaves. But that's going to be quite exciting as a colour game, particularly when we come to next summer. But also maybe for winter sunrises and sunsets. There's some joy to be had there. And in fact, I held up the previous two. Let's hold up these two. Winter sunrises feel like they might have both of those involved. There's a snowy, icy, frosty to this, and there's a winter sunrise to that might well work quite nicely. So we're on to greens, which, as you might imagine, is probably going to be a favourite place of mine to play. Or we could do the purples first. What should we do first? Maybe we'll go with the mauves. No, because we've just done the pinks. No, it's definitely green time. Definitely green time. I am just thinking I might re-stamp this because it's the only one that's not in coffee, full on coffee. I stamped it earlier and it's got some other brown going on, which doesn't seem quite fair in terms of a proper balanced colour comparison. So I'm just going to load up the stamp again. Seem to have got some bits of paper going on. Flip this over and give myself a proper coffee stamping, and then we've got 6 that are exactly the same. The paper is slightly more textured on one side than the other, but from what I've experimented with, it doesn't seem to make a lot of difference to how the paint behaves. You just get a slightly more textured look or a slightly less textured look. Grand. So I might, for these, I think, well, one of them should be landscape and one of them should be portrait, shouldn't it? Let's go with, which way up do I want it? Let's go with that way up for, actually let's go portrait for the greens and landscape for the mauves. I don't know why. It's just what my brain wants to do. Right, let's get some green watercolour on the go. I'm going to turn around again, so oh help. Starting at the, this is paint number 1. I hope I've got the, yeah, I have got those pinks in the right order. So going on to here, shadow green. Ooh, and isn't it just? My goodness, that's a grey green and a half. Let's pop some down here. That's already lighter, so I'm going to put some more pigment into it. Use a bit of water, just spread it out. That's pretty magic. That is definitely a shadow. Look at that. And a little bit of water to just spread it out a bit here. Shadow green, very pretty. I do like my grey tones. I do. Right, and the next is a much more vibrant affair. Sort of a, that's more what I would call a green gold. So they had the green gold up in the yellows. This they think is pea green. I'm not sure I want to eat any peas that are quite that colour. Do they, I mean, pea foliage. Well, no, even that's a bit darker. That's, I mean, it's a good green. I love it. I'm just slightly disagreeing with the naming here. You know how I am with words. Let's see what we've got here. This feels like more of a pea green to me. A mixture of the two would get you perfect pea green. What does this think it is? Ivy green. I think that mixed with some shadow green might give me ivy green, but that's a bit vivid for ivy in my opinion. I suppose if you've got the variegated ivies, you get that little bit of movement of green. But no, particularly in the diluted form, that doesn't feel like ivy to me at all. And ivy is one of my favourite plants in the world. There's a lot of it in the garden. There's quite a lot of it in the house. And finally up here, what are you? Ooh. See, that's got a bit more bite to it. That's really nice. Green grey. Interesting. So shadow green and green grey have both got, obviously, grey involved in them. And this, to me, has got strong ivy overtones. Maybe ivy's just different in Japan. This one to me feels properly festive, properly sort of pine branches, ivy branches. All of these greens mixed are going to do beautiful things. I'm really looking forward to painting these leaves because you've got sunshine, bright fresh summer, through to rich high summer greens, and then shadow. And they're also going to be lovely mixed with these ones up here. I'm just going to knock that back over the name because I want to be able to see these names that I disagree with. There we go. And let's come in and do some leaf painting. I think I might use this one for the branch with maybe a bit of shadow into the mix as well, because I think that's going to give me quite a nice earthy branch to play with. There's the shadow. A little bit of dark going in there. Let's pop some shadow up into here. See, yes, it's lovely in a soft form. Let's put a bit more depth into it. Nice. Oh, that's pretty. Let's give it a bit of a... These again. So with the two shadow colours, the green grey and the shadow green, that's a very sort of wintry coolth that's going on there. This, which they fondly think is ivy, is going to zing it up a little bit. That's quite interesting. But for me, again, it's the mixing. I'm so happy I didn't do this one colour per leaf. So happy. Because it's in the mixing that you really get to find out what colours we'll get up to. And then this one, which they thought was, what was it? Pea green. It's very much a sort of green goldy affair. And again, just allowing those to mix on the leaf so that you get those lovely variegated leaf colours. The sunshine of that is quite nice. I'm itching to put in a bit of the yellows from earlier to capture even more sunshine, but I'm going to resist. I'm going to resist. At this point, I'm going to resist. When you apply these in a much drier form, it's really interesting. They move completely differently. It adds pigment incredibly quickly when you've got them quite dry. Quite an interesting difference according to how much fluid you've got in the mix how rapidly these paints sort of change. I think that may have been the problem that I initially had when I played with my early Gansai Tambis, was that I probably just didn't have enough water going on for my pleasure. I like working with quite fluid, watery mixes, and with these paints it really, really makes a difference to how they play on the paper. That's quite interesting. That wasn't quite as delicious as I had hoped. And again, it's because my colour instinct at the moment wants to add yellow. It wants to go down that autumnal route because that's what I can see outside my window. I'm fascinated by how strongly that impulse is getting in my way at the moment. I'm noticing it. I'm not going to do anything about it. I'm not going to put yellow on. I'm going to keep going with the swatching game. But I'm really, really looking forward to maybe off camera stamping some leaves again. Maybe I'll do it on camera. Doing one more stamping and just following my heart on what colours I want to play with. Grand. So those are the greens. And last up are going to be the mauves. So we'll go back to an upright, a landscape. Sorry, my brain is just processing lots of things at the moment. Yeah, let's go mauve and let's go down this side. So in order to go across, we're going from bottom to top again. Let's see what we've got. That's going in there. Sorry, that's shadow. It's a little bit grey outside today. Obviously, I love it when it's grey. That's fine by me. Alizarin crimson? No. So again, comparing to alizarin crimsons I am familiar with, there's no way. That's simply not. Alizarin crimson has a in Daniel Smith terms, has a proper redness to it. This to me is a pink. It's sort of a soft mulberry-ish pink, but it's definitely pink, not red. Interesting. Let's get in with the next one, which says it's mauve taupe. Sure ought to be a colour I like, because we like our... Okay, if I turn this round, then I've got to remember that I'm going from top to bottom again. Oh, my head's hurting. And spread it out. Pretty. It's pretty. It's maybe a little bit sort of wishy-washy for my tastes. I can see again that as a mixing colour, that's going to be fascinating. And maybe one thing we should do in the near future, let me know if this is something that interests you, is to do a bit of a swatching grid with these, just to see what we get when we start mixing these colours with one another. Because I think mauve taupe is going to be one of those colours, that really surprises you when you start mixing it with things like greens and yellows. It's going to come up with really interesting mixes. Again, I'm just going to clean off the paint so I can see the alizarin crimson that I totally disagree with. Name. I do like the chalky texture of that one. That's very pretty in texture terms. Right, we're going top to bottom. Grab this one. Ooh. Again, it's really old mauve, this is. These are really interesting in terms of, it's my first sort of thought about Gansai Tambi when I think about them, is that they do have this sort of opacity compared to, for instance, the Daniel Smiths that I'm most used to. And that is different from the fully translucent paints that I'm used to working with. So again, it's a question of, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. Sometimes it's personal preference, and sometimes it's sort of project by project. There can be times when something chalky is really, really interesting to play with. Oh, well, I'm going to like this one, aren't I? It's called Greyish Blue, I've just noticed. This ought to be right up my street. Yeah, that's a proper kind of old China painting. Lovely. Might even spread it out a little bit further because I'm quite interested in how pale it'll go. Nice. But for comparison's sake with the others, I'm just going to knock it back a bit. I just wanted to see that. So there it goes in there, greyish blue. True. Yeah, for once I agree with the name. That is a greyish blue. No shadow of a doubt. So I should probably do maybe a side-by-side comparison with some of the Daniel Smith colours I've been talking about, just so you can see how much variation there is in watercolour world, not only in terms of opacity and translucence, but in the namings of colours. This is why really good watercolourists pay proper attention to the pigment numbers that they're getting in any given paint. Some watercolour paints are made with only one pigment, and then you should be getting a fairly consistent colour across different ranges because they're using the same mineral or the same pigment with a single pigment colour. Where colours are pre-mixed, as most of these are, I'm sure they are, I don't think there's much single pigment going on here, then you get immense variation between brands, because one brand will use a lot more of one kind of pigment in a colour and another will use a different. But that's a pretty rainbow, I would say. Let's give ourselves some mauve leaves. I think I might go, I was thinking I'd use the greyish blue for the branch, but I'm quite tempted by the old mauve, just because it's a bit more of a neutral. The blue is really quite blue. There you go. So you can see that going on as dry brushing, you get lots of texture, and that's a technique. So if you want to create texture on the page, again, there's so much good watercolor tutorial stuff around on YouTube. I'm inclined to just continue playing and chatting as I go, rather than doing official full-on tutorial type stuff. But in terms of applying your paint in a much drier form is a texture technique. So yeah, it's where those two colours are mixing that I'm happiest, because it's just creating a bit more variation immediately. I do like that greyish blue, it's lovely. So I'm sort of using it on the lower edge of the leaf there, because that's going to give me a shadowy look. Let's get in some of this, what did it call itself? Mauve taupe. That's got quite a pleasurable zing to it now that it's mixing with those other colours. I don't dislike that. It's turned into a beautiful lavender tone where it's mixing with the greyish blue. That's always going to be useful given my obsession with lavender. Always going to be a good thing to have lavender tones. And there's something quite nice about the chalky opacity of these for a soft fairy tale kind of look. So there's a real difference between having these pastel opaque tones and having really glowing translucence. It's a different look. So this is what I'm saying. There's absolutely nothing wrong with a more opaque watercolor. It's just going to give you a different effect. It won't be the same, but it won't be wrong. And the more you sort of play and explore, the more you'll understand A, your overall preference for translucence or opacity, and B, when you might want to bring in some opaques, or when you want to stick to full-on translucence. These are choices you can start to make. But yeah, I really do want to do some more playing with these. Maybe we'll do another episode and we'll do some maybe watercolor doodling next week. How does that sound? Drop me a comment if that's something you'd like to have included in next week's Watercolour Wednesday, or a future Watercolour Wednesday. In any case, I'm not making promises about when things will happen at this time of year. What happens happens. I'm just going to put a couple of dots of that shadow blue, what was it called, greyish blue, to give some weight to the base of the leaves. And in fact, I might go through and do that to all of these. So that'll give you a chance to have another little look at some of them. So let's bring back in this one, which is the turquoises, and I'm just going to come in at the base of the leaf with a bit more pigment to just weight it into the branch. That was our turquoises. Good. Here are our greens. Interesting. Not my favourite batch of greens ever. That's all I'm going to say for now. This is the grey green, or what did it call itself? The last green along. I do quite like that. So again, wet in wet is what we've been doing up to now, allowing the colours to just mix and blend as we go. Some of these layers have dried underneath. So officially what I'm doing now by adding more colour over the top is known as glazing. It's wet on dry, not fully dry to be fair. So the yellow ones will be fully dry. So this is definitely wet on dry that I'm doing now. I just want to create a bit more. And by glazing, you can go over the same colour again with the same colour, as it were, and intensify the tone, or you can glaze by going with a different colour over the top, and then you're going to create a different kind of mix of those colours. But I don't know if you can see. In any case, all watercolours will dry paler than the application you've given them. So what you see when your paint goes on wet is not what you'll have by the point they've dried. So going back in with a glaze over the top can just allow you to recapture that more intense version of the colour. And that's really all I'm doing here, is creating a bit more vibrancy by going over with a glazing layer. I was supposed to be sticking to the base of the leaf to get that rooting into the branch, but I got carried away, as I so often do, by enjoying myself. But what else are we here for? Seriously, what are we here for if not to enjoy ourselves? That at the moment is without a shadow of a doubt my favourite, and that's because it's the most reflective of the world outside at the moment. That's very, very clear to me that that's what's going on in my brain. This is the one that makes me happy, because this is the one that fits the season. Again, just intensifying the connection into the branches there. Maybe a little bit of random dotty colour. That's the one I want to play with. You can tell, can't you? That's the one I want to take on to something more than just a doodled look. I am enjoying that Mars yellow, even if to me it's Mars orange. It's interesting because it's not nearly as translucent as something like the Aussie Gold, which has got an extraordinary glow to it. The Daniel Smith Aussie Gold, or the Burnt Sienna Light, all those colours that I generally do my leaves in. But there's something interesting about the opacity that I'm just curious about that interaction. Maybe a little bit of Potter's Pink back into the base of some of these leaves. It's very, very opaque, that Potter's Pink. It's interesting. And maybe just another touch of the, what did it think it was? Vermilion. There we go. Nice. Grand. So I'll lay those out so you can have a little look at them, and obviously I'll dive in for a close-up so that you can see some of these colour blends in more detail. In two minds about whether to write the names of the paints down below. I think I will. And the other note I'll just make on each of them is that these are the Gansai Tambis, just in case I look at them in the future and go, oh, what did I paint those with? That's a nice colour. What is it? Where is it? How can I use it again? Grand. I hope you've enjoyed that little bit of leafy watercolour swatching. Thanks so much for your company as always. If you've enjoyed it, do give me a thumbs up. If you don't already subscribe, I would love to have your company on this creative journey. And happy crafting all.